My name is Boris. I'm in Toronto right now. It's a bright and sunny sky this morning, but it was pretty cold coming into the office. It's almost the holiday season. Everyone is getting ready to take a break, I hope, after a year of hard work. And Serge was kind enough to push the idea of creating this last end of the year conversation as a, almost a pat in the back for all of us who are working hard to build Canada's contribution to international development and impact investing. Serge, thank you for help inviting me to moderate the conversation. So I'm the moderator. I will introduce myself. I'm not one of the speakers, so I'll just introduce myself briefly so that you know who I am. Okay, so let me start again. Introducing myself very briefly so that I'm not a stranger. My name is Boris. I am the CEO of EWB Canada. I was telling you that EWB is predominantly a technical assistance provider. We mobilize, train, and deploy talent. We have 4 countries of operation: Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. Typically, we recruit young professionals with tech, engineering, business, finance, communications background. We seek to support lasting and scalable initiatives that address issues of poverty and inequality in those 4 countries. And I wanted to make a comment to the group that it's almost by force of necessity that in the past 6 years we've become impact investors. It became quite clear to us that combining the talent offering that EWB brings with a cash investment would deliver the most impact and acceleration for the social enterprises in our portfolio. So for the past 6 years, we've made 10 investments, most of them in the past 3 years, actually. And we've reshaped the organization to be able to do program-related investments as a charity. All our investments are pre-seed and seed stage catalytic. We make convertible debt investments. We have 8 companies that are still active. 2 of them have failed. And in the 8 companies, we have 2 that are significant successes. There's one recent Series A, and a company that went from a PowerPoint to like 23 countries of operation as we speak. And I was, by virtue of the work that we do and supporting early stage entrepreneurs, I get to meet a lot of founders and people who are quite passionate and driven with a fantastic energy and determination to succeed in delivering their impact at scale. And so, we have 3 presenters today, 3 founders of fantastic social enterprises: Jeff at Jaza Energy, Howard at Solar Ear, and Chis at Brighter Investments. The CAFIID team has invited them to share their story with us, and frankly, they are a perfect setup for an inspiring send-off for the new year. So, before we launch into it, here is what the proceedings are going to look like. We have 45 minutes together. I will introduce each of the speakers very briefly, and then they will give us a sense of who they are and what they do. And then we will take the last 10 to 15 minutes of the 45 minutes we have together to invite the first presenter. Jeff is from Jaza Energy. He believes that entrepreneurship and innovation can solve our planet's biggest challenges. Jeff is the co-founder and CEO of Jaza, a solar energy startup working to provide electricity to the 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa living without it. Jeff is also the founder and chair of Community Forest International. And he's earned an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2015 for social entrepreneurship. He's one of Explore Magazine's top 30 under 30, so he's a big deal and a serial entrepreneur. So Jeff, before we launch into your presentation, which is now showing on the screen, tell us a little bit about who you are. Tell us about you. Tell us, you said you believe in that entrepreneurship and innovation can solve the planet's biggest challenges. Where's that belief coming from? Tell us a bit about, tell us about you.
Yeah, well, I guess I grew up in small town, rural New Brunswick, and I think it was, problem solving by just necessity in how the community was organized. And I think that, you grow up with a lot of confidence in a small town. You grow up with a sense that there's something beyond the border. And really, I ended up graduating from high school and traveled Europe, Southeast Asia, India, came back to Canada, planted trees, bought a motorcycle and rode through Central and South America, then moved to New York and then Cambridge, England, and kind of planted trees in order to finance all that early travel. So I think I managed to grow a pretty global perspective very early on. So I think it was kind of a combination of, small town Canada where community was so important, and then a global perspective.
Awesome. So you're like a globetrotter who had to work and be an entrepreneur to finance your desire to travel. And that gives you a global perspective. Tell us a bit about the foundational story of Jaza. How did that idea came about? What was the compelling trigger to launch it?
Sure. And Francesca, you can hit the next slide. I think it's a good segue. So yeah, like I planted trees. I kind of grew up believing I could do anything as long as I paid for it myself. That was my parents' sort of big lesson. So like I ended up in, I was actually trying to write a novel when I was 21 and ended up on a small island off the Tanzanian coast called Pemba, part of Zanzibar. And I met some really great Tanzanian friends that weren't so interested in the novel I was writing, but they were interested in the trees that I'd planted back in Canada. And, I wouldn't wish tree planting in the Canadian environment on my worst enemy. But what I did see in Northern Canada was that a group of people could actually transform a landscape. A bunch of 20-somethings living in the woods could plant, hundreds of thousands of trees a day even. Yeah. So I ended up, with some Tanzanian colleagues initially just collecting seed, and we ended up growing 100,000 trees that first year, basically by maxing out my credit card, and then realized I actually Googled how do you start an international organization and created Community Forest International. And have since then, we've planted 2 million trees with hundreds of communities, done agroforestry projects, ways to produce spice, developed some ways to use carbon offsets to purchase some endangered forests in Canada. And I guess about 3 years ago, a woman in a rural community was like, Jeff, trees are great, but where can I charge my cell phone? So that was kind of how Jaza came to be. It wasn't initially a company, it was responding to a real need. Fantastic. So yeah, I can kind of outline where we are today and what we did with that original, request for a place to charge a cell phone. If you want to hit the next slide, Francesca. Just some context, like the person that said I need a way to charge my cell phone isn't alone. There's 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa without electricity. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see there's a market where people are spending $61 billion annually on stopgap technologies, candles, kerosene, torches, ways that they can just find some semblance of a way to provide lighting in their homes, or paying someone else to charge their cell phone. So it's kind of a unique opportunity where there was a problem, but there was a clear market and a way to switch from, a fossil fuel into something more renewable. So if you go to the next slide, originally what we did that sort of first year was we actually just put some panels on the roof of a school and started charging motorcycle batteries, and then people would carry the motorcycle batteries home and use them to power a single light. We've realized early on that there was a business opportunity to continue to improve that model, and now what we build is these prefab energy hubs, which is a small building that we ship onto a location. We can set it up in 6 hours. There's panels on the roof, and what happens is we actually charge, purpose-built batteries now. If you go to the next slide, there's 2 women in each energy hub that actually charge the batteries and sell a lighting kit to our customers. Go to the next slide. The battery pack now it's a lithium-ion pack that can power 4 bulbs, charge mobile phones. Our customers pay an upfront cost for a battery, and then every time they come back to the hub to swap it, it's almost like a propane tank swap. They pay a 50 cent nominal fee, and then take the battery home and use it to power their home. So go to the next slide. That's one of our customers using our lighting product in-house. Go to our next slide. So, really, we went from an R&D cycle where we tried to, improve on the idea of charging a battery, which was sort of a minimum viable product. And then this year to date, we've gone from 2 energy hubs to 40 energy hubs and power around 2,500 households. So in terms of growth, going from an idea to trying something that wasn't quite up to par by just using a local motorcycle battery, to building now a specifically designed battery, prefabbed energy hubs, scaling into 40 locations. We really realized that it's a large market with a large opportunity, but we also needed the velocity and the scale early on, because I think it's really hard to change that within a company. Once you start slow, it's hard to change and put the pedal on the metal. So we really tried to move very quickly early on, to both challenge ourselves to see if we could scale into the opportunity, but also to just build that cadence within the company. So if you go to the next slide, in terms of the year ahead, now that we've proven the model and we've shown that we can provide the value that our customers want, to the point where they're willing to pay for our product, and we've shown that we can scale to 40 locations. We're actually looking now to grow to 400 locations in the next 18 months, and currently in a capital raise to pull together the financing to do that. So we've gone initially from sort of a pre-seed to seed round, a mix of equity, largely from people that would not identify as impact investors. I don't think there's anyone in our cap table that would have said they were an impact investor. Now they maybe would, to a mix of some debt financing as well as some grant financing as well. So we've kind of gone the gambit. Initially started with the equity and then pulled in debt and grants around it. So I think that's pretty common in startups, even though you think in this space that you'd start with a grant and then go from there. We kind of.
Did you raise in your immediate circle, like on the West Coast, or what was your?
I'm actually from New Brunswick, and our office is in Halifax, and yeah, a lot of the initial financing came from people within Atlantic Canada, which is not like a necessarily known for the private money markets in that part of the world. But yeah, it did originally come from people that didn't, that came to know about us and support, whether they're sort of in the real estate space or the tech space.
Very neat. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for introducing your company to us. I'm going to ask you one question before we go into the next presentation. Like, tell us a little bit about like one critical challenge that you faced in your journey.
Well, I think in the market that we operate in, like there's, we're an infrastructure company, but there's no other existing infrastructure. So we've had to build a construction company. We have to build a logistics company. We've had to pioneer our own communication tools so our hubs can be connected to the web. We're a design for a manufacturing company. I think really it's like, you can't assume that there's any ecosystem around you. And then that's ultimately the value of what our company is building, is the fact that we can execute in these environments, but you have to build it all yourself and get to the point where you understand what excellence is to start trying to outsource and find other players around you.
Yeah, so you're building the entire ecosystem around you in order to survive.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Our second presenter, Howard at Solar Ear. So Howard started as a volunteer in development in Botswana, where he worked on the startup company called Jaza Technologies. And Jaza Technologies came up with 3 new products: a solar energy powered hearing aid, the analog solar charger, and the rechargeable battery. And after 4 years in Botswana, Howard decided to build on this success to create Solar Ear and went to Brazil to replicate the social business. Howard, you shared with me some notes about your personal story. It is touching, it's impressive, it's multifaceted. I thought you might want to also introduce yourself in that way. Tell us a little bit about you, where you come from, how you came to social entrepreneurship.
Sure, thanks very much. And first of all, happy holidays to everybody. So there's an African expression which goes, a blessing can be found next to the wound. 23 years ago, I was president of a plumbing business in Montreal, Canada. And in the middle of the night, my 10-year-old daughter, Sarah, died of a brain aneurysm. I went back to work the next week, where I was president of this international business. And these very nice American Trump-like owners of mine fired me my first day back at work, because I figured I couldn't make a profit for them. And they're right. I mean, if you lose a child, you're totally lost. So I did some therapy and then found the therapist needed more help than I did. He was crazy. I figured, look, I have these skills as a business person. Why not go to Africa, help women earn a salary? Because women will take care of the health and education of their children. Men are pretty useless. And in a way, so they'd have an income to buy medicine for their children and not suffer like I did, and give meaning to my daughter's death. In retrospect, it brought meaning to my life. So I went to Botswana as a Canadian volunteer, and my first day I'm in this office in rural Botswana, and there was a knock at the door, and there's a lady with a teenage girl, and the lady said, my student here, Sarah, with the same name as my daughter, needs a hearing aid. I said, okay, Sarah's going to get a hearing aid. I don't know how. I know nothing but hearing. So the next week I went to see Sarah at the School for the Deaf, talked to the kids at the School for the Deaf and said, tell me about your life. I'm from Montreal, Canada. This is my first week in Africa. So they talked about the tour, and obviously I've traveled in 60 developing countries, and the face of poverty is pretty similar around the world. If you have a disability, it's sort of like a stigma, like you're cursed from God. And I said, what are your hopes and dreams? So they talked about, hey, we were finishing School for the Deaf, finishes at grade 9, we're 18 years old, there's no job for us. Often we're given hearing aids from charities, but we can't afford or find a battery. So I basically wrote a business plan on their hopes and dreams. Raised $250,000 in the US, went back to them and said, okay, now go live your dream. So it was our workers who are deaf who invented the products we make. We make the first rechargeable hearing aid battery that fits in anybody's hearing aid and costs $1 in the last 2 to 3 years. A solar charger and low-cost hearing aids. And I'll get into the mission of Solar soon, but let me briefly talk about, I've started about 10 different social businesses around the world. And I use what I call a 3-dimensional tic-tac-toe business model, which is important to understand. And whether I'm working with deaf kids in Botswana, favelas in Rio, Palestinian refugee camps, it doesn't matter. It's the same principle. So think of a 3-dimensional game of tic-tac-toe. At the bottom level, you're running a sustainable professional business, just like I did with my plumbing business. And you have those 9 squares, the finance, human resource, the marketing, the sales, all the normal stuff you have in a business. The second level is the social mission of the organization. So the center square of Solar Ear, for example, one of the successes, is education. If you can get a child a hearing aid before the age of 3, she can learn to speak, go to a public school, and there are no schools for the deaf. And we believe only through education can you break the cycle of poverty. And then the top level is the empowerment of our workers. So I'll go through Solar Ear now and just think of the 3D model all the time, because you're running a social business in the 3 dimensions, the 27 squares at any one time. So Solar Ear makes solar-powered hearing aids by people who are deaf for people with hearing loss in developing countries. That's what we do today. I'll discuss where we're going in the future. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Howard.
So there's over 625 million people with a hearing loss. As I said, a hearing loss for a child prevents them from developing speech, getting an education. Often in developing countries, an adult who loses their hearing loses their job. They lose their noise pollution. And I'm sure just about everyone on this webinar has an aunt, an uncle, a parent, a grandparent who is losing their hearing, and they become excluded from family conversations and become depressed. So it really affects people at different levels. Next level, slide. So again, Solar Ear is a sustainable social business. We make a product, we mark it up 100%. All our competitors, we buy from the same sources our competitors do. They mark it up from 500 to 3,000%, because their mission is the wealth of their shareholders. Ours is children with an education, getting child with hearing loss and education. Next slide. Next slide. There. So you can see that solar charger that our workers who are deaf invented. I can't screw in a light bulb. So at first level is we run a professional business. We train our workers who are deaf. And the reason we hire people who are deaf, besides just coincidence from Sarah, is I found people who are deaf in developing countries speak in sign language. So their hand-eye coordination is better than 99% of the general population. And we need that special ability for the micro soldering of the electronic components of a hearing aid. And every business I've started, when I work with Down syndrome kids, I started business for them. You really want to find the ability of the person with a disability, and you go from there. Next slide, please. Next slide. So to date, we've sold over 550,000 hearing aids. They're getting 50,000 children going to school, all developing countries. 100,000 solar chargers. Again, the chargers and 250,000 batteries, which actually we've already saved 10 million batteries from being thrown out. So if you think of that second level again, the mission, one of our missions is environment. We have an environmental impact. And our batteries and chargers, we don't patent anything. It can be used in anybody's hearing aid. And what we also do is we help other organizations replicate the Solar Ear business model. I own nothing of it. We're actually trying to help an organization in Canada, an Aboriginal organization, replicate the business model in Canada, because over 40 million North Americans can't afford a hearing aid, which is absolutely crazy in such a wealthy area. So I give the technology, help them write the business plans, help them run the funds, and it's 100% owned and operated by Aboriginal people who are deaf. And one of the interesting things about this new program is we're going to have Aboriginal people from Africa who are deaf go to Winnipeg, basically. So going from Botswana to Winnipeg, it'll be deaf to deaf, south to north, technical training. It's an amazing program. And we actually have the workers who are deaf from the previous project choose and train the workers who are deaf for the next program. That's part of the third level of the empowerment program. Next slide, please. So, for example, in Botswana, with some of the profits, let's talk about that second level, the mission. With some of the profits, we worked on HIV/AIDS education for the deaf and lowered HIV/AIDS from 38% to 10%. In China, before Solar existed, we changed public policy that if you were deaf in China, you're only allowed to be an artist. If you're blind, you can only give massages. We changed public policy. Deaf can now work in electronics. In Brazil, we give over 5,000 speech, language, and voice therapies. I'm working at a program in the Middle East where we'll have deaf, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish people working together with a peace-building mission. And if you think about it, the deaf, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish have more in common with each other. They share a deaf culture than they do with their own religion. And what a great place to start a peace-building program. And then we're going to have with the First Nations and Aboriginal people in Canada, and we're also talking to an Aboriginal group in Australia. So after they're trained, we'll have the First Nations in Canada go to Australia, and the Aboriginal Australia go to Winnipeg. We'll do some cross-border leadership program. So you can see how the inside of that second square of mission changes. Also, one example, the kids from Botswana went to Brazil to train them. They also taught them about HIV/AIDS. So a really good social business, it's not about running in 3 dimensions. The effort is really how do you replicate and scale all 3 levels? How do you replicate and scale your missions around the world? How do you replicate and scale your empowerment programs around the world, as well as making a profit? Next slide, please. And then we realized, and even if we make 2 million hearing aids, and became the largest manufacturer of hearing aids in the world, we're not solving the problem of hearing loss in the world of over 600 million people. So we developed this new business plan, a new program, which we're starting now, called DREET, means Detection, Research, Education, Equipment, and Therapy. We're taking a holistic approach to it. And we tried it in Brazil and it seemed to work. And then I realized I can't have the world come to the Solar Air Center in Sao Paulo or Botswana or Moscow or Cairo or Shanghai or Winnipeg. How do I bring it to the people? So the next program we're working on is making the DREET program on a cell phone. And if you think about it, Alexander Graham Bell invented the first cell phone, the first telephone, for his mother who was deaf. We're 100 years later, and we're going to use his invention to lower hearing loss and the burden of hearing loss using this holistic, sustainable program to 100 million people in the next 5 years. And we're looking for our first round of financing for that. Well, we're going to have 3 different detection programs. And the first one, be able to detect using a cell phone for babies. You know, babies, anyone's ever had a hearing test, you know, you hear the sound, you lift your arms. Newborns, for some reason, when they hear the sound, they don't lift their arms. So we're developing the first hearing test using an Android cell phone. Well, we can have it done in rural clinics in Africa or hospitals. Also, we'll have a pure tone test employing micro-entrepreneurs. And I was very fortunate to have Dr. Mohammed Yunus help me with the micro-entrepreneur component. Then the research is a free byproduct from the hearing test. And then the final step is we're going to be able to take the person's cell phone and turn it into a hearing aid. Now making hearing health affordable and accessible for everybody. Democratizing, socializing, and hoping screwing the big 5 hearing aid companies who are total pigs. And I don't know, my motivation is to get against these American companies who fired me or to make things affordable and accessible for all. I probably need more therapy on that. Next slide, please.
It was all a personal vendetta, wasn't it?
I have no idea. I didn't know I'd be here today. You know, if my daughter is still alive, I'm still selling plumbing supplies in Montreal.
Oh.
You know. So our goal is really to improve the health and education outcomes of people where we work. You know, go from this vicious cycle, a lack of inclusion, lack of employment, to one of inclusion. Next slide. And our workers who are deaf, they've won all these awards. I mean, actually last week, Bill and Melinda Gates, they showed our solar charger and hearing aids at the Discovery Museum in Seattle. It's been in the Smithsonian Museum. We
deaf or have disabilities in different geographies. So all these are different dimensions of scaling a business. It's really remarkable. I'm going to give some space to Chis as well to tell us about Brighter Investments. But Howard, thank you so much for a very, very inspiring combined personal journey and social entrepreneurship success. It's really fantastic.
One final little thing that people find interesting. So Sarah, who is deaf, is now president of the company in Botswana. And it turns out her birthday is the exact same day and year as my daughter, Sarah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you.
Whew.
Yeah.
And Chis has worked as an engineer in the aerospace industry before launching his startup, and as a project manager in public-private partnership projects. So that's an interesting kind of like out of the social entrepreneurship space before going into Brighter Investments, but you also have a personal story behind the launch of Brighter Investments. So Chis, would you start up as well by telling us a little bit about who you are and how you came to launching this social enterprise?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I was working on a project in, it's kind of funny how all three of us accidentally almost ran into the problem that we're now trying to solve. But I was working on a project in Mexico where, beginner Spanish course, got into a cab, started talking to the cab driver, and he was like a friendly Mexican and said, like, hey, coming over to a barbecue we're having later. We became friends, and over time, his younger brother graduated from high school and wasn't able to continue his education in university. So we put like very little money together with some colleagues to pay for his tuition fees. So this brother could go on and continue his education in university. This is 10 years ago now, and I stayed in touch with the family and learned over time that the return on investment of this little money that we gave him, it was just a donation, but for the family, was very, very high. There was a lot of value created in getting this kid a proper degree so he could start a successful career and help the whole family. And I kind of realized, hey, the return on investment of this little money that we gave to the student was much higher than the real estate project that I was working on in Mexico. So that kind of started me thinking there is a business model here that can both be successful as well as help a lot of people. So that's how, based on that idea, I started Brighter Investments 4 years ago. Because like maybe this is a good point to bring up the first slide. Because there's something weird going on in developing countries where on the one hand you have very high youth unemployment. In Ghana, it's upwards of 30%, for example. And at the same time, a lot of employers in Ghana report like, hey, we can't find enough qualified graduates to hire. International corporations in Ghana are bringing in expats from all over the world and all levels of their organization simply because they can't find the people they need to grow their businesses. So there would be a lot of value in taking some of the most talented of these unemployed youth and educating them properly so they can fulfill this labor market demand. And that's what Brighter Investment is trying to do. And if we get the first slide on the screen, we can show that the estimates of what
Francisca is trying to get the last part going on, but somehow it's struggling.
So I'll just tell you what's on there.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically what it says is there are our estimate is that in Ghana, where we're currently operating, 120,000 students graduate from high school with top grades, the talent, the ambition, and the drive to get a degree and start a successful career. But are unable to do so for financial reasons. And worldwide, our estimate is that there's 60 million students graduating from high school every year, top of their class, unable to get a degree, so unable to start a successful career. And I think for the next slide, if we can get it up there, it would be worth it. But the second slide would show, if we can get it on the screen, is one of our students, whose name is Adwa. Graduated top of his class from high school, couldn't continue to get a degree, was working, helping his dad as a driver of kind of like a trotro, which is an illegal, unofficial bus, was earning about $125 per month. We paid for his education, and he's now working as a medical consultant and is earning $750 per month. And of that repays us 185 that we can use to pay out to investors or reinvest in new students. So the value created is very obvious, and we've done this. We've invested in over 250 students now, and I'll get to the results of that so far, but I'll explain a bit more of our program. I'll just keep going without slides. I think it's working.
Yeah, it's good.
so what we do is we have a selection method or underwriting algorithm, if you will, that we use to select students that we think are most likely to do well. So that looks simply at grades, but also at personality, drive, understanding of their career dreams, etc. So we really focus on students that we think are going to be winners, and we focus on degree programs that we know have good career potential. So that is quality education for which there is a demand in the labor market. So those two are the main pillars of what we do. Then we take those students, we pay the tuition fees to the university, we pay a housing fee, and we pay these students a monthly stipend for books and travel, etc. So that allows them to get that degree. We can also connect them with a mentor. So that's going to initially help be successful in university, but later help in getting summer internships, writing resumes, applying for jobs, and really help them be as successful as possible in their careers. And then after they graduate, they repay us a percentage of their income. So it's not a traditional student loan. It's really, if we support someone to study civil engineering for 4 years, they repay us 25% of their income after they graduate for 6 years typically. So
whatever the income is.
Whatever the income is. So that means that it's hard to predict what we'll make from one single student, because there is variance in what people earn and how successful they are, how long they take to find a job. But since we invest in a large diversified cohort, the return becomes predictable based on average unemployment rates, average dropout rates, average income for degrees, etc., etc. So that way, we really treat this as an investment portfolio. We invest in diversified markets, different industries. We're now expanding to other countries to make it more diversified. And we really look at trends in the market. So, for example, what we've seen in Ghana is, yes, engineers are the highest earners, but people with a tech degree, their salaries are rising very quickly. So we see that trend and we invest in that. And then our investors share in that created value because they get what students repay us, and Brighter Investment gets a performance-based management fee. And so from the 250 students that we've invested in, we so far have the 45 at the moment repaying, for which dropout rates at university stands at 0%. Unemployment is 4.5%, which is 6 times lower than the Ghanaian average for the same age group. Our students have increased their salary 5 times on average, and so far the default rate is at 0%. So all our students that are working are making repayments. And the cool thing is that from these repayments, like what a single student, what we invest in them, and then from what they repay us is about double. So repayments from one student can pay for 2 new students, who can pay for 4 new students, who can pay for 8 new students. And so you can see how both the impact of an investment as well as the value for the investors increases exponentially over time. And the kind of like UN Sustainable Development Goals that we're trying to address this way is of course, reducing poverty, because our students increase their income and help their families, are more likely to own a home, more likely to have health insurance, etc., more likely to educate their children, which is a big continuing one. But also by bringing market forces to this problem, by focusing on degrees that offer good career prospects, we provide an incentive to education providers to make their education job relevant. And that way we stimulate education providers to improve the quality of their education. The third problem is gender equality. Women are disproportionately affected by this problem. If the family has money to support one of their kids, it's usually the son and not the daughter. So we're actively trying to solve that. Getting more people, like getting these needed graduates into these companies, help these companies grow, helps the economy. So UN Sustainable Development Goal 8, decent work and economic growth is what we're trying to address, and of course 10, reduced inequalities. What we've done so far is we've invested in students in Ghana. I've shown you the early results that are promising. And based on that, we are now looking to expand this within Ghana to other degree programs and beyond the borders of that as well. And ultimately, our mission is to really prove to financial market that talent is investable, that you can invest in these students in a way that's safe and profitable, also risk-adjusted profitable, and that way then we can mobilize a lot of capital to really make sure that every talented student worldwide can get an education. And so to do that, what we've done is we've signed a partnership with World University Services Canada as a large NGO. They're going to help us scale, and it is possible to invest either in debt capital for more students with brighter investment. It's possible to invest in equity and really buy into our mission and help us expand this. And through our partner, it's now also possible to put in grant money into our organization. And so that's our objective for the next couple of years, is to really expand and build this in multiple countries so we can prove to financial markets like, hey, this is an interesting investment. And once we can prove that to institutional investors, then we can really start to scale this up and basically accomplish what we set out to do and make sure that there's no talent wasted in these countries.
For sure, and it's a fantastic win-win with WUSC as well, given their sort of like their student engagement in across the world. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap and really a shared mission.
Absolutely. There's quite a few stories of social enterprises kind of like disrupting or sort of accelerating what was typically a charitable model and doing things that are complementary and benefiting from the work that's been built by those charities in the first place. That's awesome. So we have a few minutes left on this call, and I would like to do two things. So first, thank you, Chis, for your story. An inspiring and exciting one as well, to catalyze the higher education of deserving youth. And so we've heard three stories: one of brighter investments, empowering young people to earn the degrees they deserve, and that will set them up for success in life. Solar Ear with Howard, who is supporting people who are deaf to design and scale the solutions that can help them integrate and be empowered in society. And Jaza Energy with Jeff, who's providing access to small portable electricity sort of charging devices for households in places where people don't have access to electricity. I'd love to ask everyone on the call, and I'm going to invite you to speak on the microphone. We will have time for one or two comments. And the question to you is, what was striking in those presentations?
And Boris, you may want to remind people to unmute their line if they want to speak.
Absolutely, that is a requisite. If you want to speak to others on a webinar, you will have to unmute your microphone. That's the only time you're allowed to do that.
Well,
Hi,
given a fact,
for Mita. Sorry, Serge, go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead, Majid.
I just found striking Jeff's presentation on Jaza, and I've been happy to recently hear that there's been some collaboration between Mita and Jaza as well on innovation grants, etc. But just the 6-hour implementation, like the ability to deploy that fast, because obviously one of the major factors in the rural and remote areas is speed. So if people have to wait 2 years for infrastructure to be set up, they just don't want to engage with it. But if one can do quick assessments and deploy the next day, that has a huge impact on the community to feel served and to feel honored by that kind of client experience. So that just stood out for me.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and in contexts that are frankly quite challenging to actually get like timely services, it's quite remarkable. What else? Someone else.
Well, I can maybe chime in. This is Serge. Just what this is an interesting eclectic group of companies, but as Thijs pointed out in his introductory comments, all three companies started maybe not thinking they were going to start a business in this space, and yet Jaza Energy, Bright Investment, Solar, EAR are innovating and supporting healthcare, education, clean energy in the developing world in a really innovative, but more importantly, scalable and business oriented way. And what I guess for me, when I was thinking about this panel, what brought these group of people together, which one might agree are very different in some ways, is the fact that their passion for business and for a social and environmental problem is what got them here in the first place. And I was very motivated by hearing them, and I'm actually pretty happy that they accepted the challenge of coming and presenting to the CAFIID group, because I've learned a lot. And going into Christmas, I'm quite motivated about next year and the work that they will do and we will do in impacting our world in a positive and measurable way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Serge. I will give 20. Well, actually, I will not. I will just give my thanks to the three speakers as well. We're 5 minutes to the hour. It's absolutely wonderful to have the three of you present your businesses. Thank you for the preparation you put into this, the PowerPoints that you sent ahead of time, the notes on the companies and on yourselves. Serge, thank you for being the catalyst that makes this possible as well. I think it was a fantastically inspiring set of stories that we heard, and also shows how, kind of everyone is driven personally to make a difference. And oftentimes I find that, the social enterprise conversation centers around the metrics, the financing, the sort of the very much in the head. And it strikes me as a conversation was first from the heart. And we're going into the holiday season, and I think for me personally, it's a fantastic sort of feeling that I get at the end of this conversation, knowing that there are people who care and who are driven to really making a difference in their own ways, and highly driven, highly innovative in how to do that at scale. So thank you so much for participating. Serge, I'll leave the microphone to you at the end to see if you have something to say about CAFIID and kind of the year ahead. If you want to thank people for the year, I mean, you've done that a little bit already, but you have a couple minutes before we close.
Yeah, thanks, Boris, and thanks to you for moderating today's panel. Just before we leave, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, a restful time over the next couple of weeks, and then come back refreshed in 2019 for a busy year, I'm sure. And there's a lot of positive energy in the space here in Canada. We'll be working, just for those of you listening in, we'll be working on an industry landscape project that's being sponsored by CAFIID, but also funded by FinDev Canada, Meta, Sorona, One Drop Foundation, and Majid, and Rally Assets. And Majid, I'm forgetting someone. Who else is funding the report? If you're on mute.
Sorry, I missed your list.
There's Meta, Sorona, One Drop Foundation, FinDev Canada, Rally Assets. I feel like I'm missing someone.
I think you've got most of everyone in there. Sorry, I can't recall.
Right, and if I'm missing someone, I sincerely apologize there. But yeah, so this report will likely be published and presented to the CAFIID membership and the wider world in March, and it seeks to answer two questions and focus on what's happening in the landscape in Canada in terms of impact investment in the developing world, but also how can we scale up more impact dollars to support these businesses we heard today, but other initiatives are happening. And then beyond that, the Canadian government, as I'm sure many of you are aware, are actively pursuing gender partnership as well as financial innovations. There's a lot of interest on the part of institutional investors in the space as well. So we'll be hopefully channeling all that positive energy into measurable projects and ways to support the CAFIID membership base throughout the year. And I mean, I wasn't sure where CAFIID was going when we started, but I have to say I'm cautiously optimistic about the number of participants, the level of conversations we're having, and the potential partnerships for the future. It all looks very promising. So stay tuned and stay glued to your emails. We'll be sending more information about what some of the activities are planned, including future webinars in the not so distant future. Thanks,
So
Boris.
just wondering if you mentioned DCAM in there. That's the only one.
Sorry, which one?
DCAM. Deacon.
Oh, Deetkin.
Yes.
I don't think Deetkin funded that report, but
Anyway.
yeah.
Sorry, I was just I was saying DCAM.
Oh, DCAM Foundation. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the one that was missing. Thank
Right.
you, Majid. And the reason that didn't come to
Danielle.
mind is because they weren't participating in the session yesterday. But yes, DKM Foundation was a generous supporter of the research as well, and we're very, very thankful for them as a member, but also as a supporter of this research. So thank you, Majid, for jogging my memory, which seems like Swiss cheese these days, probably because we're so close to Christmas.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. Don't stay glued to your email for the holidays. Just after that. And yeah, thank you, Serge. Thanks for hosting this webinar. Have a great holiday, everyone.